Hi, this morning I did a media conference here in Brisbane and I explained why we're calling on the resignations or the sacking subject to investigation of the CSIRO's Chief Executive, Dr Larry Marshall, and another CSIRO executive, Dr Peter Mayfield. Have a look. Well, good morning and thank you for attending today. I call on the CSIRO's Chief Executive, Dr Larry Marshall, and the CSIRO's Executive Director for Environment, Energy and Resources, Dr Peter Mayfield, to resign or to be stood down pending independent investigation. Both are complicit in economically destructive climate policies and renewable energy subsidies that are based on CSIRO's claims and that are adding $13 billion each year, every year, to the cost of electricity. That's $1,300 per household every year. I commissioned the Moran report by the expert economist Dr Alan Moran to assess these costs, and they use the government's own data. They cannot be sensibly refuted. Now, we know that many people are concerned about climate. Those afraid as a result of scary alarmist claims, and those who disagree with doing anything about climate and who are concerned about decarbonising our country because it will deindustrialise and fundamentally change the very structure of our society, our livelihoods and our lifestyles. As representatives of the people, Senator Hanson and I see our role, serving the people, includes checking and debating policies, especially in the Senate, the House of Review. Our responsibility is to assess the basis for these policies. As a Senator, I have held CSIRO accountable with 4 presentations from CSIRO in answer to my request for the empirical evidence proving that carbon dioxide from human activity is causing anything unprecedented in climate or causing statistically significant change in climate. CSIRO's responses led to surprising conclusions that stunned my team and that were checked with 17 internationally respected climate scientists here and across 5 other nations globally. These are some of the conclusions that from our report that we present today. CSIRO has never said that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. CSIRO has admitted today's temperatures are not unprecedented. CSIRO cited papers that do not show the rate of temperature rise is unprecedented. CSIRO relies on unvalidated computer models giving erroneous projections and that conflict with reality. It has never quantified any specific impact from human carbon dioxide. Never, and that's fundamental for policy. It relied on discredited and poor quality papers on temperature and carbon dioxide, some of which it withdrew once we showed that they'd wilted. CSIRO revealed little understanding of the papers they submitted to us. It admits to doing no due diligence on reports cited and data used. It allows politicians to misrepresent the CSIRO without correction. The CSIRO has misled Parliament. And international scientists verified our conclusions and are stunned. People like John Christie, Nir Shaviv, Niels Morner, David Legates, Ian Plimer, Will Happer. Honest, effective policies are based on, firstly, defining the problem with accurate, measured impacts from our current behaviour, so we know what we have to do. Then, define specific changes and actions so we can cost the alternatives. Then, measure specific impacts and costs as we implement. None of this has been done. None of it is being done. CSIRO has provided no basis for policy whatsoever. Scientists around the world admit that the models do not work because scientists lack understanding of climate and climate processes. That's why models cannot be the basis for policy. The onus is now on the Parliament to justify the policies because politicians are lying about the science, supposedly the basis of their policies. If the people knew that governments are telling people and governments are telling scientists what to think, then the people would be angry, and we're going to make sure they get that. In December 2016, the father of the Senate at the time, Senator Ian MacDonald, a Liberal from North Queensland, stated to the Senate that the Senate has never debated climate science, never debated it. There has never been a critical assessment of the climate science in Parliament. And I remind you that on climate, we have seen the last 6 Prime Ministers dumped largely because of the climate issue. And my report provides the people with evidence that will help the people and policymakers to question the basis for the hugely costly spending on climate and renewables. Before entering the Senate, for 11 years I held members of Parliament and bureaucrats accountable. Not one, none, could give me the evidence for their policies. Members of Parliament, though, did cite the CSIRO as the basis for their policies. That's why I invited CSIRO to present the empirical scientific data in a scientific framework that proved carbon dioxide from human activity affects climate. And that is the basis of climate and energy policies. CSIRO not only failed on climate policies, it has let down our nation, embarrassed our nation. CSIRO has misled Parliament on climate science. CSIRO is complicit because it never held politicians and media accountable for misrepresenting their statements or science. That is why I call on CSIRO's Chief Executive, Dr Larry Marshall, and Executive Director for the Environment, Energy and Resources, Dr Peter Mayfield, to resign or for the government to stand them down pending independent investigation. The onus is now on Parliament to justify all climate policies and renewable energy policies. We need the debate that has never been had and just to justify spending because there has been no evidence. Details are in the report and contain a link to extensive technical details, peer-reviewed and recognised internationally. Now, we know that people are disillusioned with the shenanigans of politicians, don't we? So we sought the truth for the people, the data, the evidence, the proof. Senator Hanson, One Nation and I know from listening closely to people across our state and across our country that people want relief from high costs of living. They want security and reassurance. They want hope. We all want integrity, truth and honesty. We want a fair go, and we want parliamentary representatives to serve the people. People are hungry to be heard and to be treated respectfully and truthfully with the data, and to know that politicians are holding bureaucrats accountable and enacting policies for the benefit of our nation. That is our commitment to the people. We have recommendations that I'd be happy to go through on the last page of the report. And at this point, I'll just pause and ask if there are any questions on this item, on this issue, before I start discussing the details. So I'm open to questions on this report.
I guess what are you hoping comes from publishing this?
I don't know your name. Georgie, we're hoping that we get the start of a debate and we get integrity restored back to climate science. And we're coming up with a number of issues, number of policies that will restore integrity to science. That's what we want, restoring scientific integrity. This is not only affecting climate, energy policies, it's affecting the Great Barrier Reef, it's affecting the Murray-Darling Basin, it's affecting farmers' property rights. This is a very serious issue, and while it's $13 billion added to our electricity costs, that $1,300 per year per household, it's hundreds of billions of dollars to farmers and to tourism, and it's trillions of dollars in destruction to our economy over the next few years.
Sorry, what are you saying is affecting the Great Barrier Reef?
Corrupt science.
How is it affecting it?
Well, the policies that the Queensland Labor government has put into place, Georgie, are not based on science. Senator Rennick and I worked side by side in a recent inquiry here in Brisbane, and we showed that. I'm happy to go into the details later, but this is about this report. Well, I'm happy to go into details about the fact that after 50 years of climate research, the CSIRO, in response to my request for evidence, empirical evidence, that we are affecting the climate and that there has been anything unprecedented in climate, after 50 years, they produced one paper, Marcotte et al., 2013, and that doesn't contain the evidence. They actually withdrew the paper when we cross-examined them on it, and that paper was withdrawn because of a number of faults that are inherent and that were known within 2 weeks of its release back in 2013. The CSIRO gave us a pile of junk that even the lead author of that paper admits the 20th century temperature projections on which the CSIRO based their claim are not robust. Even the author admitted that, and the CSIRO didn't realise that. The paper admits that the process they used for finding temperature trends cannot find temperature trends less than 300 years long. The current temperature trend was about 30 years long and stopped 25 years ago. The PhD thesis that was written by Marcotte himself doesn't have a 20th century temperature uptick. But when he was joined by 2 UN authors, it suddenly fabricated a 20th century temperature uptick. And the CSIRO didn't even know that. They gave us rubbish. The carbon dioxide paper, they gave us one paper on carbon dioxide levels. The current blip of carbon dioxide levels, rising 0.009% from 0.32 to 0.041, cannot be detected on the methods used by the Harries paper that the CSIRO submitted. And its temperature gaps, its carbon dioxide measurement gaps of 1,000 years to 6,000 years cannot possibly measure the current 60-year gap, 60-year trend. Then CSIRO submitted a second paper to us, Feldman. And Feldman itself refuted some of the Harries claims. So we had a paper from CSIRO refuting the previous paper. These guys don't know what they're doing. This is the rubbish that our policies are based on. $13 billion a year, $1,300 per household. And then ultimately, they have only one thing, and that is unvalidated models that are based on limited and incomplete understanding of climate and have already been proven to be wrong. The upper troposphere, where we radiate more than half of the heat from our planet, there is no understanding there because the models predicted that the upper troposphere would get warm and moister and more moist. In fact, the reality is the measurements from millions of balloons, weather balloons going up through the atmosphere, show that it's got colder and drier, the exact reverse. They don't understand the effect of clouds. They don't understand the effect of updrafts. They don't even agree on the fundamental question, which is what is the impact of carbon dioxide? And this is the rubbish they rely upon for policy. And models are not science. They're not empirical data. They are just a tool. And when the basis is wrong, the whole thing is wrong. Professor John Christie, who looks after the data from NASA satellites, he has said he has closely examined CSIRO's access models and found them below par, as the projections simply do not match what we actually see in the real world. Quote, climate is so complex, our ignorance of the climate system is enormous, and the myriad of models have not even agreed on a key variable, carbon dioxide sensitivities. Dr. David Evans, one of the world's top modelers, an Australian in Perth, says, quote, CSIRO climate models should not be used for policy as they are not right yet. CSIRO has nothing and the government has fallen for it. The previous governments have fallen for it. So with that, I'll hand over to questions, and then if you're finished with questions on this, then I'm happy to take questions on any other topic.
If these CSIRO scientists that you're calling on to resign do resign and they bring new scientists in who present similar or the same information, is that still going to be an issue to you? Do you have a problem with the information itself, not necessarily the people who are presenting it?
I don't have any issue with the people presenting it. What's your name? Jess, I don't have any problem with the people presenting it. They are who they are. I have a problem when they don't present it accurately and truthfully. That's my problem, and competently. And so I would expect that we would see new people come in who are vetted properly and wouldn't do this.
And by being vetted properly, what sort of standards do you expect the new people who come in to be up to?
I would expect the new people to be doing the fundamentals of science, the scientific process, which is to base all their decisions and claims and statements on empirical scientific evidence within a scientific framework that proves cause and effect. That is fundamental to the scientific method, Jess. That's all we want. We just want to restore scientific integrity. And if you see on page 12, the recommendations, you'll see quite a few points there.
I've got a question just regarding, for yourself and Senator Hanson as well, regarding masks.
I guess yesterday the Chief Health Officer called for more people to wear masks. What are your thoughts on that?
You want to go first?
I'm going.
Okay. It depends on the circumstances. There are certain circumstances where I haven't gone extensively into this. There are certain circumstances where I think masks would be useful, sensible precaution. As a mining engineer and as a mine manager and general manager, I know that personal protective equipment is essential in certain areas. It doesn't have to be worn in all areas. So it depends on the circumstances, Georgie.
We don't have a COVID pandemic in Queensland to wear a mask in hospitals, nursing homes, around the aged, the sick. I totally agree. But it's an individual choice if they wish to wear a mask. I don't. When I'm out in public, I'm not in fear of COVID-19.
And I guess on public transport or something like that, would you expect people should be wearing masks then?
The number of COVID cases that we have in Queensland is very minimal. If you go up North Queensland, we don't have it. Okay? A lot of places you don't. So if you're going to impose wearing masks, especially in rural and regional areas, I think it's ridiculous.
One of the things I'd like to add to that, Georgie, is that the fundamental issue here is one of incompetence in governance. I'm talking not just about COVID, but also about climate, and a lack of trust and a lack of data. We were told initially by federal government, and I think by the state, I'm not sure about the state, that there's no need to wear masks. And the reason they said that, Georgie, was because they didn't have any bloody masks, and they couldn't own up to that. All of a sudden, we come out with the masks, and they say it's important to wear them. The fundamental thing that's so important in the countries that are managing COVID successfully, far more successfully than we have, is trust with the leadership. The leaders have the data, they have the plan, and they trust the people, and the people respond with trust. Taiwan, Israel, Singapore, all trust the government. And those countries are under threat quite a bit. But our country, we have been loose with the truth so far as federal and state politicians have been concerned, and we don't have the trust of the people. I don't think the federal government and state governments do. My department, my office wrote a letter, or I wrote a letter to the Queensland Premier saying, "Where's your data, Premier, on which you base your plan?" She said, 2 locations. We checked them, no data. We are stumbling from crisis to crisis. Taiwan is the standard bearer. That's what we need to do, like Taiwan.
Senator Hanson, why are you in Canberra voting on the JobKeeper extension this week?
I am part of the Parliament, and I'm doing it from my office, like a lot of other senators around the state. So we are doing our job.
And I wrote to Jess, I wrote to the Queensland Premier requesting an exemption for enabling me to continue my constituency services in the 2 weeks starting next week and the week after, and we didn't even hear back from them. So, I mean, this is the way they don't have respect for federal parliament. The Palaszczuk government has just not shown respect for the people, nor to the institutions.
In saying that, Senator Hanson, would you support restructuring the parliamentary sitting calendar to avoid having to travel back and forth to Canberra and being hit with quarantine demands, for example, like having back-to-back sitting weeks for 5 weeks at the end of the year, maybe?
No, I don't. I don't support that at all. It is difficult to do Parliament from your office. I'd rather be in the Parliament itself. It's more effective, but we are doing the best that we can. And this is because Anastasia Palaszczuk said that I'd have to come back and go into a 2-week quarantine self-isolation at home, but my staff would have to go into a hotel at their own expense for 2 weeks. That was unacceptable. So hence I'm working with my staff here at CPO to do my duties in Parliament. And we talk about this, I just delivered a speech on the floor of Parliament this morning from my office, and it's about indoctrination of our educational system, basically about gender fluidity, but also about climate change. But what we are teaching our children is not the true facts. And that's where it's very important. So it goes beyond of our politicians that have no understanding. No, and I'll make it quite clear that Senator Roberts is the only one in the Senate that I know of that has the experience, knowledge and expertise to talk about climate change. And we're not denying climate change, but what we are saying, we want the truth. We want our scientists in this country, we want the facts put out, because the policies that either side of politics, and even the Greens are pushing, is destroying our country economically. It's putting a huge expense on every household, business, and if we keep going down this track, we will not be able to have the living standards and way of life that we have now in this country. So what we're doing is we want the answers, we want the truth. Isn't that what the people expect of us, of their politicians? We're not just easily led like sheep to the slaughter. We will question, as I do, on every bit of legislation that's put forward. I want the best for this nation and the best for the people. And I will not sit back, and I will, Senator Roberts, and I'm so proud of him to bring this to the forefront, that we are asking for the truth. And of these people, that whether they're employed by the CSIRO or members of Parliament, if you can't do your job, then get the hell out of it and let other people in who will.
So just on that 2-week quarantine with going back and forth from Canberra, if you only had to do that once and you had a 5-week back-to-back sitting all at one time, would you consider going down to Canberra for that, or is the constant 2-week quarantine the issue for you?
To do it 5-week back-to-back in Parliament, you have to understand that there is a lot of members of Parliament with their children, young children at home, and you have to consider that they want to be with their families.
Jess, I'd be open to any way we can do that, but I think fundamentally we have to get back to what I was saying to Georgie a little while ago. We have to come up with a plan that manages COVID. At the moment, we are slaves to COVID, and we need the data. It's now available around the world. In the first single-day sitting in March 23rd on a Monday, I raised the fact that Taiwan's got it right. I raised it again the next month. I raised it again in June. We raise it all the time. Some of the journalists are now starting to wake up that Taiwan has done it well. Taiwan has got 7 deaths from COVID. They're a country with the same population as ours, 24 million, we've got 25. They're a much more densely populated country so that they can spread disease much more quickly. And they're very close to mainland China and have a lot of interaction with mainland China. If they've had 7 in the time we've had, going on 600. The other thing that's significant, so they've done a far better job security-wise, but the other thing that's significant is that their economy has not been impacted. It's hummed along. What we've done is we've shut down our economy, and that is, the experts are now forecasting we will have more suicide deaths than deaths from COVID. Our economy will be trashed. You'll be picking up the bill long after we're gone. And that's not acceptable. We want to get back to the basics, to let people get on with their lives, the livelihoods, and their work in a way that is safe. Other countries have shown that. That's what we need to do. We need to start telling the truth in federal government and state government and get back to the data and get back to a solid plan, real leadership. That's what we need. And then on top of that, if we need precautions of how we run Parliament, we're happy to do that. I've suggested it to the state government and the federal government. We introduced that with a letter to the federal government, and the federal government has mimicked some of those policies in the way it runs Parliament now.
As far as COVID goes, tell us the truth. What did people actually die from? Was it with COVID or because of the COVID? Because there's underlying health issues, and I think we have been lied to, and I want the truth because it's really scared many Australians who have no need for that scaremongering that's gone on. So tell us, let's see the autopsy reports. Did they die from the COVID or with COVID?
Do you understand that in making those statements that you are fueling sort of conspiracy theorists that don't believe COVID exists at all?
Oh, I'd love to answer that question. I'd love to answer that question. Because whenever someone talks about conspiracy theory, it always identifies the fact that they haven't got the data. They can't refute us on data and with a sensible logical argument. So they come up with smears, labels like conspiracy theorists, denier. I take no notice of that. This is the lady who tells it as it is, and we do the same. And people eventually wake up. They're starting to wake up about Anastasia Palaszczuk and Scott Morrison already in Queensland. The murmurings are there. So we just tell the truth, and if you want to believe it, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. Just don't label us, because it exposes that the people who do label us don't have any data.
Surely you have heard that people, even when Daniel Andrews was asked about the 30-year-old that died in Victoria, what did he have underlying health issues? Oh, that's private, that's for the family. He wouldn't even announce that. What we've heard is that he died from cancer. So other people are dying from other causes, not necessarily because of COVID. And this is what we need to the truth, to understand what we are dealing with COVID. I'm not saying that COVID doesn't exist. Of course it does exist, and people do get sick from it. But we've shut down our whole country because of it, and that concerns me greatly, the impact it's going to have on people's lives, which it is.
To be clear, I didn't label you conspiracy theorists. I labelled people who don't believe COVID exists.
And I want to make clear that I corrected myself in the second sentence. I wasn't referring to you, Georgie, not at all.
I shall leave it with you.
All right, thank you. Any more questions on restoring scientific integrity?
I was just thinking the two papers you're referring to, are they policy documents or documents for debate?
Marcotte et al. 2013 and Harry's 2001?
Yes.
They were so-called peer-reviewed scientific papers that CSIRO had not even checked, and they tendered it to us. And it was complete rubbish. And they wilted under cross-examination and withdrew the paper from Marcotte. The Harry's paper was refuted by the next paper they gave us on carbon dioxide, the Feldman paper. These guys don't know what they're doing. And this is what the government is basing its policies on. They were peer-reviewed scientific papers, which shows that the peer review process has failed. They're no more scientific than witches in Salem.
Yeah. So my point is, though, that the government were never going to institute them as policy because they were documents that were refuted.
No, what's your name? Paul. It's worse than that. They weren't policy documents. They were the basis for CSIRO's recommendations on policy.
Yeah, that's my point, though.
Yeah.
The government it's entirely up to the government to make a determination in that respect.
Yes, Paul, and one thing that surprised me was after years of being told that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger to the planet, a danger to people, the CSIRO admitted to us they repeatedly refused to say that carbon dioxide is a danger. So I said, how can that be? Politicians have told us about the danger from carbon dioxide. And they said, well, you'll have to go and ask the politicians. CSIRO has not said that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. The politicians have.
So with that in mind then, if that's the case, then why would you want to sack the CSIRO people if they've not made that statement, or is that...
Because they have claimed made some other claims that are false and not supported by empirical evidence. And a scientist's fundamental duty is to make sure that he or she has the empirical evidence to prove their point. And they haven't got it. It's basic incompetence or possibly worse.